Welcome to Andy Decodes.
Hello and welcome. Today I'm joined by Clarke and Gary Jones, and then we're going to be talking about the Pentyrch UFO incident, but it's going to be the update of the new information and data that they've both received. So welcome to the show and thank you.
Hi, Andy.
Hi, Andy.
Right. So we wrote a few notes down before we came on air. So do you want to start off, Kaz? Do you want to start with the flares?
Yeah, sure. I want to address a couple of issues because of what I call my not-so-learned friends. Put it out there that what they think I saw that night were flares hanging from parachutists' ankles. Well, this wasn't an air show, and that's the only time you'll ever see smoke or flares from a parachutist's ankles. They have some very strict rules and regulations for training over private land, because this all happened over private land, not Ministry of Defence land. And they've got this nice bit of legislation, the Training Over Private Land Act, by the Defence Infrastructure Organisation for the Ministry of Defence.
Yeah.
And I've read the document cover to cover, as you can imagine. And one of their rules for training over private land for the use of pyrotechnics. And that's section 30A, B, and D. And I'll read them to you briefly.
Yeah.
Section A. Special attention is to be paid to any restrictions imposed by the landowner for the use of blank ammunition or pyrotechnics or other training materials. Section B. When permission has been given for the use of ammunition or pyrotechnics, units are to warn the local police. And lastly, D. On no account should red flares be used for any training purpose. Now I'll repeat that. On no account should red flares be used for any training purpose. Now, somebody independently wrote to the Ministry of Defence. In fact, it was the headquarters, and it was a Miss Martin that did this independently to ask whether or not any flares were used on a Freedom of Information request. And she actually said, I would like to request information regarding exercise chameleon that took place in the Pentyrch and Llantrisant area of South Wales on the 25th and 26th of February 2016. Can you tell me if any aircraft set off flares during the exercise? If so, what time were they set off? And if so, what location were they set off? Well, they're not allowed to use them. And clearly, a search for the information has now been completed within the Ministry of Defence, and I can confirm that no information in the scope of your request is held. No flares were used. So what was it that I saw exactly? I'll tell you. It was a huge interdimensional pyramid UFO. No mistake, from 200 meters away. There was no mistake. And I said on the morning of the 26th of February 2016, in my comments on Wells Online, I can categorically state that was no exercise. And would you believe it's taken us 7 years, but we do have our answers now, because the Ministry of Defence have absolutely no paperwork whatsoever for £3.8 billion of equipment that was in the air and all at the same time. Not a single piece of paperwork. And they broke every rule in the book. I had one of my not-so-learned friends say to me recently, oh, Kaz, they made a few mistakes. and they broke a few rules. And I said, no, I said they broke all the rules. And that's not a mistake.
No. Well, I was going to say someone knew what they was doing, but obviously they didn't know what they was doing because of the way it was done. So, sorry, go on.
I think, everything was rushed, even though they knew that these things were coming.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of talk about the NOTAM that was posted, and they seem to be hung up on this NOTAM, which was listed, or I don't know if it still is listed, on the Ministry of Defence website. And Gary found this out for us, and all NOTAMs have to be planned and submitted a minimum of 5 days before they go live. And so they all have a commencement date because they all have to be planned in advance, except for this one, for the 25th of February 2016, that was inserted at 9 p.m. that night. There was no planning. And so between us, we dug a little deeper, you could say. And Gary wrote to the National Air Traffic Services because surely if a planned NOTAM were to go out, they would know about it. So he wrote, I'm making a request for information on a NOTAM that was listed for Exercise Chameleon, conducted on the 25th and 26th of February 2016. The area in which this took place was South Wales, UK. Could you please tell me the following? What time was this application made for the NOTAM? Could you please provide me a list of which aircraft and vehicles were listed? At what time did the official NOTAM get issued for this area? And could you please provide me with a map of the NOTAM, including an outline of the borders and boundaries for said exercise? And they wrote back, thank you for your recent inquiry requested information about this NOTAM for the 25th and 26th of February 2016. I've been in touch with our NOTAM team, and unfortunately, they've been unable to find any information regarding this specific NOTAM. Really, this is the National Air Traffic Services. If anybody should know, they should know. So Gary wrote again, this time to the Strategic Command. And this is the Ministry of Defence, the people that issued this NOTAM. Same questions. A search for the information has now been completed within the Ministry of Defence, and I can confirm that no information in the scope of your request has been found. So they've got no paperwork. But however, under Section 16, Advice and Assistance, I can advise you that the MOD submits NOTAMs for certain military exercises to the Civil Aviation Authority at least 5 days prior to a military exercise. That's before it goes live.
Yeah.
So we wrote to the Civil Aviation Authority, and these are the people in charge of your airspace when you're flying off on your holidays somewhere. And the Civil Aviation Authority wrote back, again, same questions. What time was the application made for the NOTAM? Could you please provide a list of what aircraft and vehicles were listed as part of this NOTAM? At what time did the official NOTAM get issued for this area? And could you please provide a map for the NOTAM outlining the borders and boundaries for said exercise? This is the Civil Aviation Authority. Your request has been considered in line with the provisions of the Freedom of Information Act 2000. Following a review of held information, it has been determined that the CAA holds no information within the scope of your request. So, the Civil Aviation Authority have no paperwork for this alleged NOTAM because it was never planned. It was inserted last minute to cover the few hours in which they were dealing with those UFOs in this area, but then they exceeded it by over 50 miles that night, something they would never have done in an exercise.
No. But wasn't they were there 2 days prior to the incident taking place as well. Yeah. So there's 3 days remaining.
There were no NOTAMs ever issued for those aircraft. In fact, it took the Ministry of Defence and the RAF 3 years to answer us, to even acknowledge that those aircraft were there. On a Freedom of Information request, they are legally obliged to answer within 20 days. 3 years. And in fact, We put in 3 Freedom of Information requests in total regarding those aircraft that were here prior to that arrival of that craft. The first time the Ministry of Defence said that they held no information regarding the aircraft, so they knew nothing. That's what they told us. And to the layman, that might have been sufficient. But because I know the truth, we pressed again. And the second time they wrote back to us and said that they checked for a second time and they confirmed that they held no information. So twice they lied and they confirmed that. And that was a lie too. But then eventually we got an answer from RAF Northolt and we had a Section 26 not in the public interest. And I actually believe it's very much in the public interest.
Oh, yeah. Because, like you said, it's happening on private land. It's not like it's happening on a military base or out at sea or somewhere that's like hundreds of miles away from residential area.
Well, they had to have written permission from the landowner to train on private land. Yeah. And that's a big thing. And National Resources for Wales and Rhondda Cynon Taf Local Authority both own the land, and neither of which, well, Rhondda Cynon Taf knew nothing about it. And National Resources for Wales went one step further, and they told us that the military would definitely need permission to be there, and they had absolutely no permission at all to be there. I'll find the Freedom of Information if you like, and I'll read it, because without permission, there's no way that an exercise could ever take place.
No. Unless it was an actual incident.
It was a real incident. Absolutely, it was. We've called out several authorities, including South Wales Police, lying to us multiple times. Gary wrote again, this is the National Resources for Wales, specifically around Smilog Woods and why the roads were closed, etc. Why was Smilog Woods closed to the public during this time, February the 25th and 26th, 2016? What exactly was the reason for the military being in Smilog Woods during this time? Whose authority was it to close the woods to the public just during this time? And why were the roads closed down in the areas of Llantrisant and around Smilog during this time? And they wrote back to us. There was no permission granted to the military to close the woodland and the public paths and let off explosives in the woodlands mentioned during these dates, or in fact any dates. So we have no records. This type of activity would have required permission. So if it had occurred, we would have had a record. Therefore, Regulation 12.4a, Environmental Information Regulations 2004 applies. Information not held. So they did not get permission from the landowner, without which no exercise could ever take place.
So have you actually spoke with the landowner or landowners?
That is the landowner.
That's
National Resources for Wales own Smilog Woods.
And you've spoke with them and that was their response?
That was their response. We also wrote to Rhondda Cynon Taf Local Authority about whether or not they received prior notification of this exercise, which would include permissions, and they held no information, none at all.
So have they not done their own investigation as to why nothing was put forward to them prior to this?
No, nothing. I've been shadow banned for 7 years over this. This information is only just starting to leak out because they might be able to close me down digitally, but they don't stop people talking. No. And that's the beauty of being able to communicate with people, I think everybody in South Wales that night was affected, whether it be from their livestock being worried, and of course the Farmers Union weren't told, and they have to be, and this is right on lambing season. And I have said I wonder how many farmers lost their sheep that night. That's not a joke. This is how people make their living. And when a sheep gets worried, I mean, the reason why it's a crime is because when a sheep gets scared, it aborts its fetus. And they were flying their Chinooks and their Apache helicopters and their Lynx and their Pumas and their Merlins and God knows how many other helicopters over their land and worrying their livestock that night. This was a huge thing.
It doesn't take much to distress cattle, I suppose.
Or sheep.
Does it really? sheep, cows, horses, anything like that.
Right. And no one knew anything. We have all the rules and regulations, and one of the things there must be is a press briefing, there must be a ministerial briefing, and the members of the public must be told, especially for such a large and disturbing exercise. And nothing, absolutely nothing. We'd written to the Welsh government, they knew nothing. Nothing at all.
So who do you think, who do you believe then was behind it all? Obviously, it's something to do with the government, but do you think it was some agency involved with the government?
Yes and no. NATO were here. So there's just not, it's not just the British government. We're looking at the whole of the EU.
Well, yeah.
And now I wonder whether or not the Russians knew that it was coming, because it was only the week before that we turned away 2 Russian Tu-160 bombers from our airspace. And of course, that antique Russian aircraft carrier was being sailed through our waters at the time on the long way round to Syria. So
the scenic route.
Yeah, I wonder whether or not the whole world knew that he was coming. Tim Peake was supposed to have been on the International Space Station and gave an early high five to everybody in Wales for St. David's Day. So they were watching Wales. So I think they knew well in advance that it was coming.
So what? This might sound like a really stupid question, but why do you think they didn't tell anyone?
Because they didn't want to draw attention to it.
But then it's probably drawn more attention to it by not saying anything than it would have done by letting people know.
Do you know, once we, with the aircraft that were here before, we had written to the Ministry of Defence, and if they had answered us and had the decency to answer us and say, it's just an exercise, then we wouldn't have been bothered by it. We wouldn't have been out watching with them. And we also wrote to Wales Online as well, because surely the press would know, because there has to be a press briefing. And they too ignored us. So when you've eliminated everything else, whatever remains has to be the truth. And clearly they were watching for something, because they didn't leave the airspace unwatched, not for a solitary minute. One aircraft would turn up before the other one would leave, and vice versa, They never...
So there's always... so there's always something in the airspace waiting. There's no gaps.
Yeah, and very low.
There's always an overlap.
Yeah. I mean, we asked the Ministry of Defence, because I was quite frustrated with them all. What person, organisation or public body did you receive written permission from to conduct this exercise over private land? And the MOD states it does not hold information that we request. What information was given to the local community or local government for such a loud and disturbing exercise over a congested area. A search for the information has now been completed within the Ministry of Defence, and I can confirm that the MOD does not hold the information that you request. Were any restrictions placed upon you by the landowner, organisation or public body prior to this exercise? A search for the information has now been completed within the MOD, and I can confirm that the MOD does not hold the information you request. What written permission did you receive to land your helicopters in silent hours in a congested area? A search for the information has now been completed within the Ministry of Defence, and I can confirm that the MOD holds no information in the scope of your request. And can you supply a copy of a detailed recce, including a photocopy of the map and routes, something they must have? And a search for the information has now been completed within the Ministry of Defence, and I can confirm that the MOD holds no information within the scope of your request. For a multi-billion-pound operation, the Ministry of Defence have absolutely no paperwork. Nothing.
That's the biggest bit that makes no sense, because every vehicle that goes out has to be logged. Who's driving it, where it's driven, the reason it was driven to wherever. Because I used to work for local council and I used to drive one of their vehicles, and even doing that, we had to log where we was going and why we was going there. And that's just that's a pool car. That's not even a military vehicle. Do you know what I mean? So We had to put down everything, and they've not got anything for.
That's the funny thing about it. Every single organisation, from the local level to the Welsh government up to the RAF and MOD, there is just no paperwork for anything. Where there should be like a stack full of it at least, especially as I said, this huge operation, and there's absolutely nothing. So how can you call it an exercise? By their own words, they say there wasn't one.
And the thing is, they have to keep it to between 6 and 10 years on the premises, and then after that, it needs to be archived for however long after that.
I'm not entirely sure about that. I think with exercises, there has, the paperwork that's involved. There's certainly had to have been a ministerial briefing and a letter sent to local ministers for, especially in Wales, and that would remain on the record. But the fact that the Welsh government had absolutely no idea that this was going on is outrageous.
Yeah. So, so even though they're saying that there is no logs, there's no paperwork, there's nothing.
Excuse me.
Do you think that they do have paperwork and they're just denying it?
I think the organisation and the task forces involved are foreign. I think the British Army and the British Air Force were involved that night, but so were the Americans. And I think the Americans very much hold the cards in all of this.
Yeah.
And Gary has some very interesting information from RAF St. Athan to the United States directly after this incident on the day. So, but we'll cover that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But anybody that thinks that this was an exercise over training on private land, let me assure you that one of their regulations, section 37, subsection D, the Training of a Private Land Act, units must pay particular attention to the prevention of noise, especially during what they call silent hours. And similarly, exercises are not to be planned in areas where disturbance would be caused to local inhabitants in their homes. So perhaps they'd like to explain to the inhabitants of Llantrisant and Baether and Pontyclun why they were hovering helicopters so low over their houses that one lady had the tops of her trees cut off in her garden.
Yeah, you were saying that about the broken trees. Was that the broken trees?
No, Gary was talking about the broken trees in Smaller Woods.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So they broke the minimum heights and minimum safe separation distances that night, which are laid out by aviation law.
Yeah.
They're not allowed. I think the biggest thing that they broke that night was what the Ministry of Defence call the avoidance policy. And this policy is so serious that it involves royal households. And I love the military because they don't break the rules. They set them out and you take your life in your hands if you break them. And this avoidance policy says, in practice, military low flying is not conducted in certain areas. In particular, our aircraft do not conduct low flying within the controlled airspace of surrounding civil airports. Also, to avoid overflying centres of population of more than 10,000 inhabitants. And in addition, there are restrictions placed on the overflight of specific industrial, medical, and other key establishments. Well, those key establishments are royal households. And the population of Llantrisant is over 15,000. But they overflew low in silent hours at 4:30 in the morning, landing their Chinook helicopters in what they call a congested area on Llantrisant Common, next to a hospital, which is a medical facility. And the Royal Mint being right there, of course, is on the industrial estate. So what part of that avoidance policy didn't they break? Because Cardiff International Airport's just up the road.
Wow. We all know Chinook aren't the quietest craft. You can hear them miles away.
So there were 3 of those.
Well, I can imagine what that sounded like. At 4 in the morning.
Yeah, in silent hours, So that's outrageous.
Yeah. It is. I've got a quick question for you. Just going back to what you were saying about Wales or the UK involvement. Do you think that the UK was only involved because of the location? Because they knew where this was going to happen. Our involvement was solely to do with where it was going on.
I think our initial response was because of where it was going on. But I think we are deeply involved with NATO and with the recovery of these craft, hence Galileo satellites. And that's why it was a sticking point when we left the EU, that the Ministry of Defence were being told by the EU when they could use Galileo, because the Galileo satellites are a bank of satellites. It's not just one satellite, and it tells you a lot more about what it does rather than just where you are on the planet, you know. And they're using the satellites to monitor for these craft. And Ross Coulthard was kind enough to tell us just last year that the Ministry of Defence and the Americans are monitoring for a frequency to know when these craft are, quote, going to appear. And they're using the satellites in order to do that, which is why the satellites are so important. So, yes, Galileo works hand in hand with GPS, which is the American bank of satellites. And they work together. So they take up the whole Western world, if you like. So the only reason that the RAF and the Army were involved here, I think, is because it happened here. And the same would apply for any other country within the European Union, that their Air Force and their armies would be used to respond directly if it happens over their land, shall we say. But NATO would be involved,
Yeah. No, thank you for that. Sorry. We have got a couple of questions. Gary, does Gary want to talk about anything before we go to the questions?
Go for it, Gary.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out. Kaz has introduced a lot of
I wrote some notes down before.
Let's. Sorry, can I? Are you?
Okay. Yeah, sorry.
All right. I was just going to talk about an update on the radiation side of things, maybe. As people know who have followed this case or have seen it from the beginning, where we've done the field research and everything, we did find radiation there, electromagnetic radiation, very strong in the magnetic field part of it. That stayed in the Pentyrch fields for a good 5 years, near enough 5 years. Most strongly in the area where the hand of lightning came down that Kaz described. That was its strongest source. Up in Smilock Woods, it was there for about 3 years, and around the crash site area and where the thing had come through the trees. What I want to just point out is I never released this information before, but I may as well talk about it now. We had it confirmed from a nuclear radiation expert. He's an engineer in this sort of thing. I've got his LinkedIn profile if anyone wants to see it. He had a discussion with me about, because I couldn't really present the radiation, the nuclear radiation, gamma radiation testing that we done, because the machine, the device that was originally used, although it worked, I don't know if it was properly calibrated or it was properly used by a previous group that I once worked with. But I bought myself one of those more updated digital devices, and I started using that. And I showed the results and told the man all about what we were able to do. And he said, well, the results you've got here are not entirely that high, but they're higher than the background areas. And this can only be a result of beta radiation being present in the area. And as we've talked about before, beta radiation would not be present in those fields of Pentyrch. They wouldn't be present anywhere, really, because it's like decaying gamma radiation, isn't it? Breaks down. That has been confirmed as being present in the areas of Pentyrch fields, especially in the Ball Patch area and by the gates, where the two strongest presence of those craft were. Obviously, the barrels where Kaz and David were. Yeah. And up where the thing came through the fields and let out the arc of lightning. So I find that to be very, very conclusive now, along with the magnetic field radiation that was present. And, of course, now some of the reports that I've been able to find, studies actually done by defense departments in America that show these craft, whatever they power themselves with, give off this microwave level radiation and or this type of EMF. And that can have long-term effects on people, especially if it's still present and it's still coming from the ground. I mean, we had sickness. I mean, this is something that people overlook.
Yeah.
People who didn't see the craft, who weren't there that night, but who may have been present with us in the beginning, all suffered ill effects, nausea, sensitive skin, a sensation of burning skin, migraines, very difficult to see in the light. And these symptoms would happen at least 3 or 4 times when I went there. I'd say maybe half a dozen times, and they wouldn't subside. They wouldn't go away, not for at least a good 48 hours. And even when I took some pretty strong painkillers, because I get terrible migraines, this thing wouldn't touch it, but then it just go away on its own, like someone just switched it off. And it was very, very unusual. And I would just like to point out, that there are no geological formations in the foundation of the rock or anything that would have a strong magnetic field presence or a strong, anything radioactive. The only real source this thing could have come from is the craft that Kaz and David saw. That's the only logical explanation left. And to me, that's pretty significant evidence that needs to go in people's in their thinking now.
One of the things I asked Gari to do is to look into weather radar to see if that had been deleted as well, because there seems to be an evidence of absence where they've systematically gone through and deleted a lot of information. And Gari looked at the weather and radars. And I think, would you like to explain about the temperature?
Yes. We had a bit of an issue with NASA's Worldview satellite. This is very strange. If you're talking about deleting of evidence, this has got to be one of the most abundantly clear examples of it. Their Worldview satellite, I don't know what the satellite's called, but it goes around the Earth and it takes like a composite image. It does it in layers, puts it all together, and you see how the world looks in a 2D layout. And normally every day there's an image that gets put on there. Something may be missing, maybe once or twice, but for some strange reason, the incident that happened on the 26th of February, it's like starting from the 19th or 20th of February, the satellite goes off. And right through to the 28th, there's a huge gap of like 7 or 8 days worth of information. It's like somebody just switched the whole thing off, not to look down on this thing. So whether that's been deleted or whether that's someone did it deliberately, I think it has been done deliberately because NASA are not that incompetent. It's just very strange. So anyway, this led to me and Kaz looking into trying to find other weather videos, because there are plenty of satellites up there that take images of the Earth, and we thought maybe one of them got close enough to zoom in on that day. Maybe we'll see something, but it was very difficult to find that. But I started coming across weather data charts. Of course, these things are weather stations plotted all around Wales in various locations. And I noticed something very strange in Cardiff the night in question. Would you believe this, right? There's at least a 5-degree Fahrenheit drop starting from around 20 past 1. And it goes down 5 degrees Fahrenheit, which I think is about -2 or 3 degrees in centigrade.
Yeah.
And it peaks downward, and it drops all the way down just at the time, or on the time, that Kaz's interdimensional craft makes its appearance. And then starting from that time, the 20 past 2, it goes back up again to its whatever it was before. And I thought, well, that's a bit odd, because I looked at all the other areas in Wales, and there's no drop, there's no cold front. There's no sweeping area of cold blanket of cold air coming in. It is directly in the Cardiff area. And the only thing I can describe is that whatever this craft is doing to get here, it's obviously affecting the weather itself. It's taking energy out of the air and it's dropping the temperature, I reckon. Because that's been reported from a number of other sightings. And what's interesting as well, is something that connects to it, is that strange snow that was in both the fields of Pentyrch and Smilog. We have video for the Smilog one. They just started weird snow in those 2 locations. So this is just more evidence of strange energies and interactions of craft that I just find, to me, that's just, you can't explain that away. Not as a
It's
weather.
just not normal behaviour.
It's
I'm
an
good,
anomaly.
Andy, but I can't make the temperature drop by 5 degrees just in this area. At the time,
You're that
Yeah.
good, Kaz.
But I did say that they were just waiting for me to drop my hanky for them to start
Yeah.
their, 3.8 billion
Hmm.
pounds worth of operation, but that's the time that all the helicopters and everything started moving in. And I couldn't have known that because I couldn't have seen them from here because they were 20 miles out, but they started moving in at the exact time that thing appeared. And that's how I know. And that's how I knew it wasn't an exercise, because I saw it.
Yeah. So did you notice any of the weather conditions changing, like you said, the 2 days prior when all the military craft started moving in? There's nothing then.
No. Just for the hour.
Just
for that
for the
thing coming
moment
through.
that it was
For
going on.
that exact moment. It slowly begins to go down, and I reckon that must have been an indication to the military and those who were watching that must have been some indication, because this is something else.
The sentry turned up, wasn't it? So so they must have known yesterday that it was coming through.
They must have.
Yeah.
They're obviously they've obviously got sensors and monitoring equipment on that Z418, the very interesting military spy watcher plane, but it's got technology on there which we can't even find out half the stuff they've got. We know it's got a FLIR system and a very sophisticated radar, but other than that, I don't know. But it's clearly, 3 full days and nights, 2 planes circled right in this one area, even though before that they went down to Cornwall. And I think they settled on somewhere above Plymouth, and then finally they parked themselves in the sky, going slowly in circles and zigzags for 3 full days and nights. And there's no mention of that in an OTAM or military exercise or anything. So there you are again.
They followed the ley lines. That's what they were doing. So it seems to be where these ley lines converge, that these craft are able to use them as some form of conduit to come through into this dimension. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, Earth is part of 2 galaxies, not one. It's like we live on BBC One, and they live on BBC Two, and they inhabit the same space and time as we do. So this is why these craft seem to appear and disappear instantaneously. But I think actually they're in these conduits for a while, which is why the military know and we're able to train for it before it arrives.
Yeah. So they're kind of like them just passing in and out. You think that they have any control over that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just strange. It's just like flicking a remote on a television, frequency to be able to move.
That's it. That's all they're doing, changing the frequency.
Yeah. And the satellites are being used to distort that frequency to stop them from coming in. And that's what the military were doing here.
Do you think they're also... Sorry, I was just going to say, do you think they're also using satellites to distort it so that we don't see as much as what's going on?
They're using the satellites to distort the energy lines. Yeah, definitely. That's what they were doing here. Now cybersecurity has a completely different meaning to me. And that's why the satellites are so important, and why Space Force apparently up there protecting the satellites. But I also think, perhaps 5G's got something to do with that as well. Because that's
wow.
You don't need them on every lamppost, do you?
Well, this is it. This is what I was just going to say to you. When we had 3G and 4G, you'd have them dotted about like every couple of miles. Where I live, I can go out in any direction, and within 200-300 yards, there's 2 towers and like 3 boxes. It's like it's not even that. The part of Northampton I live is not even that big of an area. We're like right on the outskirts of it. So 5 minutes going east, we're in the countryside. It's 5 minutes going the other way, we're in the centre of Northampton. So
4 IC chips on the PCB within it than my computer. So what do they need all that for? That's not a light system,
But have you noticed though that the last couple of months that they've been out doing work on them? See, I thought it was just a couple around the area, but 'cause I drive for a living and drive around a lot this east and southeast of the UK. pretty much every single mast that I drove past, there was maintenance people there doing work on them.
Just begs the question why they jack them up at night. But we've gone off the subject slightly, so.
Yeah, sorry. It kind of related.
Yeah, I think it is related.
Yeah, there's definitely just too many of them. And you still
I
don't
was
get a
just gonna
decent
say-
5G signal. Sorry.
I was just going to say about the whole coming in and out those objects. I mean, that thing, if the UFO part, yeah, those objects have been theorized and if not probably proven now to have been doing that for many decades, if not centuries. So yeah, you know, they come in and out at any time they want.
Yeah. It's
So they
just,
call them trans-dimensional. So they can come into our airspace instantaneously and move between our airspace into bodies of water instantaneously. And we don't have flying submarines even today. But these craft are able to do that, and that's why we can't follow them. We certainly can't dive into the water after them. But
No.
they are here. There are some that are here. And there are some that are interdimensional or trans-dimensional. And there are those that are coming. And I think it's those that they're worried about.
yeah.
Well, this was the interdimensional craft was actually discussed in that recent House Congress hearing, wasn't it? With the commander who saw the Tic Tac thing and that David Grush fella, and I can't remember the name of the other guy. But they all discussed it. It was all mentioned about interdimensional craft, you know. So it's not I mean, they're putting it on public record in America now, so it's not what's the word? It's not a far-fetched thing. It's a very real thing. And in the next year or two, when they have more of these sessions, we're going to learn more about it.
Yeah.
It's just
yeah,
not with it now.
When I first came forward and I said these things were interdimensional, I saw it emerge through the space. I was told that was impossible. I can only tell people what I saw. And I've always put my hands up and said, well, maybe it was there and I just couldn't see it and its lights were off. But no, I saw that thing come through a black veil into our existence, into our world, like it came through a fog, you know.
Can I just tell you something that I encountered? Everyone in the chat's heard it before, but around, I think it's 1996, I was driving back home. I'll keep it short as I can. Clear day, Friday afternoon. There's a silver object in the sky. It shot across. It lit up electric blue. The sky opened, bright red. It went through and the sky closed. And that was it. Within 3-4 seconds, it was done. So I've seen an object go, I presume it's through a portal, or I don't know what it was going into. But 1 second it was there, and the next thing, I had to pull over. I felt, you know, when you get that sick feeling straight away? I had to pull over onto the hard shoulder because I felt
we have
just
multiple objects here. Nothing on the scale of 2016, but we still have objects here that are UFOs or UAVs or UAPs, whatever they want to call them.
And AAC, I think it is now as well.
Yeah, well, you know, they keep changing the names so that they can deny I'm holding any information, you know. But we still have them here.
Yeah. So are they in the same area as to the incident?
Yeah.
Or are they different parts of South Wales?
No, in the area from the Garth Mountain and
Pentyrch
I think it was last year, Gary, when I threw the barbecue and invited all the radio hosts and bloggers to my home by way of saying thank you for helping me get this information out there. And the one thing that I asked for was to have a low UFO come in, because we have them all the time, just above the trees, and that everybody would see it and that nobody would film it. And that's exactly what happened. We had a low UFO come in, and it stopped at the trees behind my house, and everyone saw it, and everyone was pointing and cheering and clapping and shouting and everything else. And not one of these people filmed it. And these are supposed to be professionals.
Yeah, well, you'd think
it couldn't be done. It was too quick, and I mean, the one was quite large. It was like a big bright white thing, and it wasn't a satellite or iridium flare, because I know what those things look like. This thing was quite low.
Yeah,
you could see in the direction of where the fields were, you know, where this thing came up to the hill. And I saw it. It was just like a big, bright white, like just a
Yeah,
huge
Gary
thing, you
was
know.
there.
Oh, there it is,
Yeah.
you know. We're all like, come on, and then it's like, get our cameras out. It's like, damn. And then some of us went to the field again, and then there was another one just as well, where the area where it came in, I think, just a bit more to the right where Carl said it came in. It was like a three-sided triangle lights thing. It was there for about 3 seconds, but it seems anytime anyone got a camera on it, even we couldn't get it. Or
I've seen things go out through that way as well.
I think they're teasing us half the time.
Probably playing games.
I think
They've
they
got
do.
to
I
be.
think they do.
I think they want to be seen, but I think they're able to read us somehow. If you have a pure heart and a pure mind with no nefarious intention, that they will come to you. Or if you're in a group of people, this is how CE5 works, and you all have a uniform fault, that they will appear to you. But I think if you do have nefarious intentions or you're afraid, they won't come to you.
No, I strongly believe that as well. Another question for before any of this happened, so before 2016, did you have any encounters with UFOs or the paranormal?
No.
I've had quite a few.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had these.
It wasn't a part of my life.
No.
You know, I've been accused of having an interest. Well, let me just spell this out for people so that they understand. Yes, I watched the Disclosure Project back in 2001 because it was advertised as a press conference, and I found it interesting. Did I join a UFO group? No. I watched Close Encounters and ET too, but that still didn't make me want to join a UFO group, and it still wasn't part of my life. I've watched the Texas Chainsaw Massacre too, but it doesn't make me a serial killer, you know? It wasn't part of my life. It was something that was on the TV. I watched it, end of, or on the computer, end of. But, you know, did I dismiss the idea that we were alone? I think you'd have to be a complete imbecile to think that we are alone. We're a speck of dust in our own solar system, let alone the galaxies that we now know of. And there are billions upon billions of galaxies. So the possibility of us being alone is an impossibility, you know? It just can't.
Yeah. No, I get where you're coming from with that.
But I certainly didn't believe in little green men or Spielberg's funny-looking aliens, you know?
Yeah. No, I was just wondering if there could have been a connection to anything that went on prior to that, but
I never looked. I mean, for all I know, we could have had pyramids on a weekly basis, but I wouldn't have seen them because I wouldn't have looked, you know? But I've looked since, and since that and friends of mine have seen multiple craft here. It is a real hotspot.
Yeah. Just jumping over to Gary, you said you'd had paranormal encounters of sort.
Well, two as a child. Two as a child, I could talk about. I'll say it very briefly. When I was 5, I moved to a new area, and I lived on a 3-story house, and my bedroom was right at the very top, and we had the living room on the 2nd floor. And I was about 5, not long after we moved, and for some reason I had these 3 encounters with the one very tall being. He was about 15 feet tall, standing outside my living room window, and I remember getting out of my bed like some sort of. I wasn't sleepwalking. It wasn't a dream. It felt like I was in my area, my room, my bedroom, but the colors looked different. Sounds seemed to travel different, or reverberate different, I think the word is. The colors just didn't quite match. It was like I was moving. I don't know how to describe it. I can't say what it was, but it wasn't a dream or hallucination. Whatever it was, I was experiencing this maybe an out of body experience or a higher consciousness or something.
I didn't realize we were going back to childhood because there are some strange things that happened to me as a kid.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I saw this strange being outside the living room. He would be 15 feet tall, very slender. I mean, wasn't muscular or anything or broad, but he was obviously clearly a very strong individual. He could probably pick me up and throw me easily 30 feet. But he would just stand there and look at me. Big, tall, white thing with this, like, conish-like head, and but he was very well defined, and he wore a black sort of suit. It looked like some sort of swimsuit, but it was not like that. It was very different. It looked like an oil, like some sort of like oil kind of color. It had really interesting shimmer to it. And after the third time, he walked away from me, and he sort of faded out into the distance. And the second time this happened was probably when I was about 7. This was not long after I had my first UFO sighting, or just before maybe. I just saw myself walking down one of my streets. Again, not a dream, not a hallucination. I wasn't making this up in my mind. I was definitely experiencing this. Like, I could physically feel myself walking and, feeling the cold and seeing everything. But, the way things look were very different. I mean, in terms of how the road was all like, I don't know. Have you ever seen Avatar when he sees the tree light up? It's like that, but very golden and silvery and, just very amazing colors. The sky looked like I was staring up at a picture of NASA's galaxy or something. And there was these two.
Isn't that what they call the Silver City?
I don't know, but there were these 2 silver beams with blue uniforms on, and they just pointed out to a galaxy over there, and they kept saying that way. They didn't say anything, but I got the messages that we're all from there. That's what they were telling me, and I thought, I'm 7 years old. Why am I remembering this stuff? And I'm 40, So, those are the 2 things I've had. So
mine went on for many years as a child, and I thought it only happened to me, but then I saw what happened to me play out in the opening ceremony of the Olympics in 2012, and then I knew that it was real.
Do you want to tell us about him? You don't have to.
It started when I was about 3 years old.
Yeah.
And doctors have a term for it. They call it night terrors, but it's not night terrors. It affects 2% of children.
Right.
And it's some form of sleep paralysis. And I was attacked by what I can only describe as like these shadow creatures. They had 2 legs and 2 arms and a head, and that the only thing about them was their eyes were lit up. And there were thousands of them crawling over you, a bit like the Dementors in Harry Potter, that they try and take your life force. They try to get inside of you. And there was the opposite to that, which was the only thing that I can envisage or visualize her as is the Mother Mary, but she seemed to be on this ball of light. Right. And they'd hear her coming, so they'd back off, but they wouldn't go until she arrived, and then they'd flee. But the ball made a sound, a bit like a chime ball, those Mexican chime balls.
Oh, yeah. With a ball inside the ball, sort of thing.
She just got there all so slowly, but I knew then that I was safe, if you like. I couldn't open my eyes until she came. And I always used to think that happened to me, and that went right on until I was about 14, 15 years old. And then I saw it play out in the opening ceremony of the Olympics, and it was supposed to have been a scene for the NHS, and it was the only scene that they wanted removed from the opening ceremony. And the organisers said no, because if that were the case, they'd remove all the volunteers, and then they wouldn't have an opening ceremony.
Right.
And I think the organizer was asked about these shadow entities that were running around the outside with illuminated eyes. And he said, they're just fillers, but that's not what they were at all. At all.
That is very odd. That really is. But do you think that either of what you've experienced had anything to do with the incident?
Do everyone I've spoken to, without exception, and I don't know your background, Andy, has had some kind of trauma in their lives. Yeah. Whether that be a crap childhood or something. It's almost like we're being tested to be stronger than the average person.
Yeah.
And that is without exception.
I go along with that.
Yeah, definitely, 100%.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I've never asked you, Andy.
No? Well, no, you don't.
But I know.
We chat like we've known each other for years, but we don't know each other's background, really, other than what we've spoke about on here.
It's like they
So-
test us. We're being tested throughout our lives to make us stronger.
Yeah,
And that means suffering sometimes.
I get all that. But what are we being tested for? What's the next step or the next level?
To be stronger, to accept what we see.
I can maybe offer a bit more on that one. I just think there are some people who are given or chosen maybe to have an incredible experience, whether positive or negative, because I think maybe they identify with these people that they are capable of handling it. And at some point, people are going to have to speak up. They need people who are strong enough to speak up about it. And that's why some people, maybe some people have these experiences. Like I said, I've spoken to so many people, and this seems to be the common thing. Whether it's a positive or negative experience, whether it's something in childhood or even into teenage years, even in adult years.
Yeah.
Some people just have a bout in their lives where these strange things happen to them, and then they stop. And then later on in life, if they're still able to handle it, all of a sudden they become very, very involved in the paranormal UFO culture, and become investigators and speak out and stuff like that. I mean, that's one of the. That's something. I'm not saying it's everyone, but many people do.
Well, that's what happened to me, basically, in a nutshell. But it wasn't. I never planned to be doing this every Friday.
Yeah.
But I've always been interested in the paranormal, whether it's to do with ghosts, spirits, UFOs, just anything out of the ordinary. I've always been interested. In fact, back as I can remember, was watching Arthur C. Clarke on a Sunday evening.
No relation.
Just about to say, is he related? Used to watch that on a Sunday night, and then it was brother used to get the magazine. Is it Unsolved Mysteries? I think it was. It was every month or every 2 months, and it stemmed from there. So I've always been into this, and then just one day I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to do it at a different level. I don't even know why I chose to do it. I couldn't tell you.
There comes a point, I think, where we have to make a decision. We'll all have to make that decision on doing what's easy or doing what's right. And this is right for you, Andy.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy.
No.
I know that.
I was just going to say, I think we were talking about St. Athens, US stuff. I mean, do you want me to just bring that up? Or
yeah, that was one of the questions.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we'll talk about Mr. Grush.
Oh, yeah, this will lead into what they're going to do next and what we're probably going to do next, because it seems to be all coming together some way. But let's get to what's that? Oh, yeah.
So that's the question. So I'll read it out only because it goes on podcast and people won't understand the question because the answer because of the question. So Nickname is asking, can Gaz talk about the US I can't speak. The US St. Athens. There we go. Got there.
Yes, this is something that's been kind of developing over the years. We had a royal charter plane come to St. Athens that very day this thing happened. It came in around 5:30 in the afternoon or evening time there. Yeah, about 5:30 afternoon,
Yeah.
Anyway, the significance of this is that particular plane very rarely, if ever, comes to St. Athens. Now, what is ZE-700? It's a royal charter plane that comes out of RAF North Holt, particularly from there. And this doesn't fly around your everyday government official or military official. This is meant for the big boys. You know what I mean? Your generals, your commanders, your admirals, your prime ministers, your cabinet ministers, your royal family.
Yeah.
We know David Cameron was in Cardiff on the very day that this thing was going on. We also know that, well, now King Charles was there also. And it's just interesting that these two very high-profile people in our government and royal family are just right in the center of Cardiff on the very same day that this thing has finally happened. And Very little mention about them in the news. I mean, there was discussion, but very little mention about what they were actually doing. But I've got it on record now that once the plane landed here, there is something called the ICAO code. I think it's called the International Call All Out Code or something. ICAO is what its acronym is. And what you do is when you're flying around, you type in a code or you put in a code that tells you where you are and where you're going to be going, right? It gives you a destination and a place where you are heading to. This plane takes off. I've got its code. I've actually got the flight number and the code, and I put it in my June 2022 presentation. It went to America. I believe it went off to one of the bases on the eastern coast, which would have been Patterson Air Force Base, maybe. Then that plane the very next day comes right back and lands back at RAF Northolt. Now, why is this significant? Well, you know, if you're talking about the United States being involved in this, it's very likely that they were the ones controlling this with NATO, because our military were probably just involved in keeping away from all the real good stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, what I discovered later on is someone posted a story on a website called Politicite. That's POLITICITE. And there were two stories in there about someone saying a military whistleblower who worked at that base, US Patterson Air Force Base, didn't actually sign any non-disclosure agreement or non-disclosure, whatever they're called, about that incident, right? Which meant he could talk about what he saw. Now, he said one of those big C-117 Globemaster planes landed at that Air Force Base that very next day or that night in question. And he saw something being wheeled off that very big, large plane, and it was said to have come from the Welsh area. Now, I find this very interesting, right? Just with the incident that he's describing, because I know that once that thing got shot down, the roads were all blocked off in Smilog Woods. Then the helicopters that were still flying came into that area. And I know from David's statement, because he saw it himself, and I also got the tail numbers, one of the Chinooks made 3 sorties backwards and forwards from RAF St. Athens right back to Smilog Woods, just after the time this bang had been heard by everyone miles around. And David and a few others I've said now saw something being taken underneath this helicopter, and it landed down at RAF St. Athens. I just find it really interesting that that something was shot down and then it was taken away and then it was flown off to the United States. Now, and then of course this Royal Charter plane flies off that very same day and then comes back the very next night, and it's got King Charles and probably David Cameron, Prime Minister, on it at that time. Yeah. Something they saw, they definitely were informed of something going on, because there's no way they'd be here for the two of them in the area at some major UFO incident. And then 2 months later, if this means anything, right? President Barack Obama comes over to the United States. Now, I've double-checked this. I'm sure this is correct. There was no state visit. There was no UN meeting or G7 or G8, whatever it was at the time.
Yeah.
Nothing like that. There was no announced visit. He just came here in his plane, saw the royal family, saw the prime minister, and then went off. Without so much as any sort of he didn't want to discuss what NATO was doing, what the UN was doing, what the G7 was doing. He just came here, and I reckon this is connected. I'm not saying it is. There's just too many things rolling together here.
Yeah.
And that Politicide story, I mean, I don't know if I would love for that witness to maybe speak to us or maybe come and give us a bit more detail, because we're lacking more information on that. But all these things tie in. So what is that the Royal Charter plane coming in, and all these major political royal figures, and there's just no doubt that they've got one of those craft that was shot down, and maybe we'll talk about that a bit later.
Yeah.
Well, whatever the Chinooks were carrying was so important that those Chinooks had to be escorted by 2 of our best gunships, the Apaches.
Yeah, the Apaches. Which amazingly, if people haven't put this together by now, we have the Apache landing at Cardiff International Airport just 12 minutes after that massive explosion, with generator failure and his cockpit on fire. I mean, what the hell caused that? And the flight time would be roughly about that length to get it for the Apache. It probably flew there a bit slower because with the damage it had. But then we've got it on the Richter scale as well from Monmouthshire, a station 40 miles northeast direction that actually recorded the shock wave, a little bit of shock wave, but it's there. And when I asked people at British Geological Survey, the experts on this, why is that thing there? Can you tell me? Oh, it's probably something man-made. That signal that you've got there, it's transient signal, is definitely man-made. Well, what was up that night? Who's doing what? What was active? Our military. They opened fire and set off an explosive device of some kind. Something exploded.
Yeah, I'm guessing you don't get many Apaches landing at Cardiff Airport on a regular basis.
Maybe maintenance, but not for cockpit generator, because these helicopters are 130 odd million pounds a piece, and they're they're one of the most sophisticated helicopters we have.
Yeah,
so I'm sorry, but that doesn't make any sense to me. So unless, of course, they knew it was coming and they opened fire on it. That's because the evidence is there, Andy.
It speaks for itself, doesn't it? Really, it's more than what the officials are doing, anyway.
Well, we've got more evidence for this case than I mean, I'm not going to have a go. I'm not knocking Rendlesham. Rendlesham Forest is a brilliant case, and the same with Roswell, another brilliant case. But I'm like, how much evidence do they have compared to ours? I mean, they've got a lot, I know, but we've got so much, and yet some people are calling us frauds.
Yeah, it's not. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So, I was going to say, sorry,
we do have other witnesses. I'm not the only witness.
Oh yeah. You said before. So, right, shall we go for a break and then we'll carry on with what you was talking about?
Indeed, yeah.
If your audience wants some questions answered as well, because they're probably
there's a few in there. So what we'll do a few questions, and then if you want to talk about, can I say the guy's name with the broken trees?
Well, Oscar Green.
Oscar Green, yeah. I wasn't sure if you.
I thought the one Kaz is going to play, though. That's a totally different person. This is just a person who confirmed broken trees.
Right, okay. Right, we'll go for the break. Yeah, sorry. We'll do the break, and then if you want to play that interview. Yeah?
We have disguised his voice because his identity needs to be protected. And you'll see why when you hear what he has to say. And this is an excerpt from his full interview.
Yeah. And you said that's 6 minutes long, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we'll do the break. They'll give you a chance to get it ready if you've not already done so. Okay. And then
How long we got?
As long as you want.
No, I mean, to the break.
5 minutes.
Okay. I'll be back.
I'm going to have to run downstairs anyway, so I'll be right back.
Yeah, that's fine. I need to get a drink and throat's really dry. Okay, right. I'll see you in 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
See you soon. Bye.
Good.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello. Right, so we are back. Kaz is going to play an interview. It's about 6 minutes long. So it is, we can hear it, but you might need to listen, turn your volume up a touch just to get the full information, I suppose.
Okay.
So whenever you're ready, Kaz.
Okay, short background then. These two people are businessmen. They use survival skills as a form of escapism from their daily tasks. And they weren't initially going to go to Smilog Woods, to be honest. They were going to go somewhere else. They chose Smilog Woods because it was closer. And as I say, this man's voice has been disguised to protect his identity. But because we're in Wales, I guess a lot of people will understand the accent.
Right.
But I will play it. It's only an excerpt from this interview. It's not the full interview.
Yeah.
It lasts for 6 minutes long, and then we'll discuss it afterwards, if that's okay.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
Can you tell me then what happened that night?
He just talking away about it in private bar, and we can sort of hear like a rumbling helicopter.
Yeah.
That faintly, but close but not close. We hear that, and we just didn't pay any attention to it. And but we could hear it, and then all of a sudden, we hear the bang. But the only way I can describe it is it was loud, but it wasn't so loud. It was loud to the point where when we started talking about it, we felt that maybe because of the length of forest being the trees between it,
Yeah.
because we assumed it was a crash, we thought maybe the trees had dampened the sound. But anyway, within in milliseconds during that, the easiest way I can describe it is if you stood on a vibration plate, like an exercise,
Yeah.
the vibrate, it was like that, the ground went
Right.
for a minimum of 2 seconds, if that. We both spoke like the things flashlight. We assumed like that. You can still like the this helicopter airplane something.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided we need to camp and put some odds on, because it was a big walk back up the road. And we thought we'd grab some more cans, because they'll be out in drinking. And we'd head down. So as we were going down the wind is,
Were you walking down the main road then?
no, we were walking down through the woods
Okay.
because we were at, like so far up the woods towards the front of the game mountain right at the back. We
Yeah.
have to walk down through the woods, not so much on the trail, off the trail. So as we were getting closer now, we could hear like people's sounds. So as we're coming, we turned our torches off and we got low down and waited a couple of minutes walking like, so we go there like it's bad idea, see something in the grass, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we did decide we're going to go further on that road. So we managed now to get to a point where we did crash on the one side of the road.
Yeah.
And then you have to make the bait. And then the other side is like a bit of a bank. And like an incline of trees. Well, there, obviously, we were coming down that incline of trees and trying to be quiet and sneak in. And we were I could get maybe 30, 40 feet still up in these trees where we could see down to the road and sort of the other side where this incident had been.
Yeah.
And then we decided to go from thinking it was a crash, or maybe it's, a helicopter plane crash or thing. So we're looking down and we can see loads of vehicles and they're all parked up. They're parked exactly all here and there. And I can only describe, if I'm military sort of shape this, I assume, what it looked like. And people, I'm going to explain it, I don't know what it's called, they're like all in one suit.
Hazmat.
That's the one, so like that. And we've seen 2 or 3 people walking around in where this object was, that crash moving, and we can see an object, but on my honest truth, seeing it there, and bits and things all the way, I can't say to you, I seen a UFO. I can't say I seen a plane. As I'm looking at it, obviously a bit wrong. At that time, we assumed it was just an aircraft.
Any wings or tail sections? Could you see any shape to it at all? Any colour? Anything like that?
All I could see when we were waiting and walked out was I had like a trail, maybe so far behind it, not a long trail, but it was the object, but there was debris, but I can't specifically remember seeing wings. You know, I'm not saying it can have a propeller, but it had a trail of sort of behind there, I could see damage.
Yeah, I saw that on the day we went up on the morning of the 26th.
And all I can remember seeing from where we was looking down at what they were around was, to me, if you picture, you know, like a glass Coke bottle,
Yeah.
half of a glass Coke bottle without the top end, that sort of little dip shape and then back will bulge to the bottom. I can pretty much remember that sort of shape, but we could possibly say as well, because it looked like it mounted, not so much mounted, but dug in the ground.
Okay.
You imagine when it hit the ground, I'm not saying there wasn't more to it, but perhaps it dug in the ground. I'm not saying it was, but it could have been. Because like when objects crash, they hit the ground and they dig in.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, going from there then, where we was, we decided, oh, we'll walk onto the road. We'll be fine. Literally, we've been stepping on the road and walking not even 5 yards. People come up to us and grabbed us. And I mean grabbed us, like grabbed us.
Yeah.
And they took us behind the truck so we couldn't see anything. And they asked, what are we doing here? What we seen? And we just said, we're camping up there, we heard something, body down. And they were like, what devices we got in? They check up what they got the power phone. All of a sudden, one of them walks off from us and gets in a truck, a pickup truck. So the vehicle.
Yeah.
And he pulls along, and then they sit us in there. And they don't even, I can't describe it, it was like awful silence. All the way up down there to by past that hotel, down to by L'Oreal, and then they drove us up to the bus stop. Do you know where that is in Talbot Green?
I do, yeah.
And when we pulled up by the bus station, I can only describe it, we sat there for like a minute before they even let us out. But there was no words, they didn't say anything. We were just sat there, and they were, one of them was doing something, and the other one was looking at him, and pointing us out towards the right back. And then they opened the door, one of them opened the door and let us out. And they returned our phones. And then, obviously, we didn't check our phones first of all, but we had passcodes on them.
Yeah.
But, like, obviously, we were, as soon as we got out, they got, we were like, oh, what the heck?
That's only an excerpt of his interview. And what the military did to them in the woods that night was totally illegal.
Yeah.
They were assaulted. They were illegally searched. They were illegally detained. And I did discuss this with you before the interview. What do you call it when somebody forces you into a vehicle against your will, drives you off into the night and you've no idea where you're going, and where you sit in silence with other military personnel in the dark? That's kidnapping.
Yeah.
Before they eventually release them. But even though they had passcodes on their phones had been reset to factory settings before those phones were returned to them. What the military did that night was not only a breach of our rights, but a breach of international humanitarian law, because even in peacetime, the military's job is to protect the civilians, not to assault, not to detect, not to illegally kidnap and drive off into the night. And as it were, those men had to walk back to Smilock Woods to get their vehicle. By the time they got there, it was getting late. I mean, they drove them miles away from Smilock Woods.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of them, as I say, is too afraid to even speak to me, but he has confirmed via text that what that witness has told me is true.
Yeah.
And I believe witnesses. It's taken a lot of guts for those people to come forward. But he saw that green object on the ground, described like half of a glass Coke bottle with the top cut off, which explains how that object moved. When I said it skipped and bobbed and moved from side to side, very much that. So now we know the shape of the green object that the military took out, and it explains the additional EMF trail that Gary found in Smilog Woods. It seemed to be all along the roadside edge. That's why we think that they were now stacking up bits of this craft that they were picking up the floor.
The Chinook took it off back to the base.
Right. There's no legal mechanism to close a public right of way, let alone to assault and detain people for being on that public right of way, especially in an exercise.
Yeah, the only reason would be if they was part of that exercise, and obviously there wasn't.
That's the strange thing about it. The people who were identifying themselves as police are apparently all retired from the police service. The police don't know nothing about an exercise, but they know who the people were involved, apparently. So, isn't that
so they know the names?
But they don't. But they've all retired. How convenient! And I would just like to point out, because we've got so many little white lies. I wouldn't even call them white lies, but just the things they were saying that day. Some people who were driving home trying to get back to their loved ones or coming home from work, maybe they couldn't get through the woods in Smilog or around Smilog, or even some of them were coming up the M4 ways or the motorways there anyway. And they were all being told the same story. A lorry's overturned, it's on fire, and you're going to have to turn around. So, I mean, you've got all these roads and all these different places, miles apart in some areas. I mean, that must be one big lorry, to be...
I was going to say, it must be a big lorry, or there's a few of them scattered about.
I thought, I'll just share this with you. This is from the South Wales Fire Service. And I just asked them, could you... I'm requesting information for any fire engine services that were called out to fight fires between the 25th and 26th of February 2016. Could you just provide me in table format, date, time, and location, and what the emergency entailed? And when you get to the time when all this was going on, there's no fire being listed for Pentyrch or Smilog or Lantrisant, and nothing to do with a truck on fire or a vehicle on fire. So that was a lie, and whoever these people were blocking the roads, they were not policemen.
No.
Because they weren't involved in a counter-terrorism drill, and this is something that might tie into this, Kaz. We contacted the police over and over and over again about counter-terrorism drills, seeing as the military exercise wasn't holding
Well, I would say why you did that, actually, Gary, because it was the Royal Mint. You see, there's been an attempt at backfilling by multiple agencies, and the Royal Mint being one of them, that told us that they'd received prior notification from the Welsh Extremism Counter-Terrorism Unit. Interesting. So Gary asked them again to show proof that they'd received prior notification, and they went on to say that they have no paperwork. This is the Royal Mint. No paperwork or documented evidence of the notification of this event. We were informed verbally, and given the passing of time and lack of written notification, we're unable to be able to any more specific as to when we were told. So it seems to me all you have to do is phone up the Royal Mint and let them know that you're letting off military-grade explosives because there's an exercise going on, and nobody checked. Nobody checked.
And I will just add, the reason how we've come into the police now is because that was their official explanation. Us continuing on with the police and the counter-terrorism thing, eventually on the FOIs, we appealed it. Then we took it to the Information Complaints Officer. I think the ICO is what they call themselves. And just by the sheer grace of their answer, I wasn't expecting this, but I just wanted to have them say no. But then they said, well, the South Wales Police got back to us after the Information Commissions Officer forced them to. He's like the real high up on this. Answer the sorting question, will you? They've obviously they've made a reasonable request here. And this has taken 6 years.
7.
Yeah, 7. I'm just wondering when we started asking them about that. 6 or 7 years.
We
Anyway,
asked them 11 times,
point is
Gary.
that- yeah, we've asked them multiple times. But the point is this. They said that the Welsh counterterrorism and extremism units, they were contacted then, so that they talked to the South Wales police, and they said they didn't know nothing about this. There was no exercise listed. So they've given a false story to the Royal Mint. The police have been lying about the counterterrorism thing. Now they admit there was none. And now they totally nullify what the Royal Mint were told as well, or what they've said to us in an FOI. So they're lying to us again.
South Wales police were hilarious. They
Brilliant.
literally, I gave them enough rope and they literally hung themselves with
They
it.
didn't hang themselves.
They tried telling us that, in fact, I'll have to read it because it is funny.
Yeah.
They kept hiding behind these two exemptions, national security and law enforcement. And as much as I wholeheartedly believe that national security should be a priority,
Yeah.
police counterterrorism exercises in this country have never been a secret, ever.
No.
So I'll just read you our response to them because it is funny. Okay, I think you'll appreciate it because I did. But dear South Wales Police, thank you for your response to my Freedom of Information request, requesting whether or not you conducted a counter-terrorism exercise on the 25th and 26th of February 2016 in the Llantriston area of South Wales. You quoted two exemptions, Section 24.2, National Security, and Section 31.3, Law Enforcement. Having given your exemptions some consideration and wholeheartedly agreeing that national security should be a priority, I do not agree that your exemptions are valid in this case. You state, to disclose whether or not the information is held would undermine the force's capabilities, which consequently would be detrimental to their ability to deal with the ongoing terrorist threat we face. It would be counterproductive to place information into the public domain about any counter-terrorism exercises which would inform the general public, especially those with malintent, that counter-terrorism tactics, techniques and procedures would be on display or will be in the future. Counter-terrorism operations by their very nature are fundamental to the safety and protection of the country and the public at large. Therefore, to confirm or deny this information is held, negatively impacting tactics, techniques and procedures, which is not in the public interest. I give somebody a B+ for that because that was absolute drivel. So I wrote back to them and I put, on the 28th of June 2016, in the Llantriston area of South Wales, you did indeed conduct a police counter-terrorism exercise in some disused warehouses adjacent to the Royal Mint and Llantriston Common. A letter was issued and sent to all residents of Llantriston and the surrounding areas to warn of this exercise in advance. Posters were also erected giving notice of this aforementioned exercise. Did the rules for national security and your ability to police not apply then? Or indeed the public interest? This is just one example of police counter-terrorism exercises being announced in advance, where they were advertised by the mainstream media, on television and on local radio stations. Surely notifying people in advance, sometimes months in advance, would be a risk to national security? I'm asking about an alleged exercise that took place 7 years ago and would in no way impact national security or your techniques and procedures. Police counter-terrorism exercises have always been announced in advance in every major city in England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. They've also been announced on a Europe-wide counter-terrorism exercise in advance. This subject has never been a secret until now, for these two dates specifically. You mentioned several times your tactics, techniques and procedures. I'm not asking you for any of those, but here is a link to a video on YouTube where a senior police officer is giving a running commentary of the police in action during one of your counter-terrorism exercises. And that just happens to be the Assistant Commissioner herself. This is just one example, but there are many more which I can provide on request. I feel you are deliberately trying to avoid my question, which is reasonable. And if national security or your ability to police did not apply in the country's capital and in every major city in the United Kingdom and across the whole of Europe and the rest of the world, why then will you not answer any of my questions regarding the 25th and 26th of February 2016 in the Llantriston area of South Wales? If you do not answer my request, I will ask for an internal review and provide more evidence if necessary. If that fails, I will lodge a complaint with the local Police Complaints Commission and my MP. In the famous words of the late great President J.F. Kennedy, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. The law requires that you answer me, and the exemptions you have given have never applied. Police counter-terrorism exercises have always been advertised in advance. I would appreciate a very quick and timely reply and not leave me waiting the lawful time allowed. This request is something that can be dealt with quick time. And quick time it was dealt with, because they gave us an internal review, which we asked for, and they did it all within 8 days. And they upheld their original denial. You know, the internal review has been conducted in a fair and impartial manner, and their original position was upheld. So you don't get a fair and impartial anything from South Wales Police because they're self-governing. And I've always said South Wales Police should be answerable to a higher authority, and they're not at present. So we did go to the Information Commissioner's office to hold South Wales Police in contempt, because they are not the law. They're there to uphold the law, and the law requires that they answer us. So Gary had to submit all of our information to the ICO because they don't take on everybody's case, but they did take on ours. And South Wales Police indeed were forced to answer us. And the response dated just the 20th of April this year. There were no counter-terrorism exercises in February of 2016 in the Llantriston area of South Wales. So why did the Royal Mint say that there was one? Or where the Royal Mint just making that up, you know?
Yeah. It's the same with the Royal Glamorgan Hospital. I mean, they're still going with the whole exercise thing. They're the only ones still holding out. But in the beginning, they said they didn't have any. They were not informed of anything, and no one said. But then later on, they changed their story, and as you can see, they were trying to keep it all hush hush. But I mean, I've just got a quick FOI here from someone who was working that night. It was one of the first people I actually managed to see comments or have a little talk with. His name was Matt. I blanked out his last name because I don't think he wants me to tell his full name, but he called himself Matt. And I'll just read out his really interesting points here. This is him working the night shift in the hospital.
Yeah.
I was working a night shift at the Royal Glamorgan Hospital. Can't be certain what time it was exactly, but there was a loud bang that shook the whole hospital. I ran to the window, for I thought something had crashed into the side of the ward I was in. Shortly following, the smell of sulphur was coming through the vents, which seemed to linger all night. Through the corridors of the hospital, I went outside to try and puzzle what had happened, and smoke seemed to mist through the air, seemed to come down from towards the common, or at the time I thought a factory might have had an explosion of sorts. There were helicopters circling right through the night, from the early hours right up to 6-ish, maybe in the morning. The only explanation we got later on was that the army were on a training exercise. So that's obviously a cover-up story. Yeah. I could explain, well, how we know more about the explosion now. You just heard the 6-minute clip. A gentleman was in there with his friend. They saw what was there. I'll just get into Oscar Greening because I know this is on your list of things I wanted to talk about. This actually is a person who rides his bike on the trails that they have up there. They have mountain pallet bike trails and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those, like, you know, you really want to do the outdoor
purpose-built sort of thing.
Yes. They even maintain it themselves.
Yeah.
Anyway, right by this area where that thing was happening, I've got Oscar Green's conversation here because I had a really good discussion with him. Now, we went up there on the 26th of that day, or maybe on the 28th-ish, he said, but it doesn't really matter because previously, on a video I managed to find, I spent 2 weeks looking for these videos, and Kaz will even confirm this. I spent 2 full weeks, practically hours every day, looking through videos on YouTube for people who had GoPro videos of them, or maybe somebody was in the area, to try and see if maybe these trees were damaged before this incident. They weren't. I finally found a video that had the trees all standing up, all perfectly fine, nothing snapped, nothing smashed. Now, that was the 21st of February it was uploaded. Okay, so that's like 5 days before. Now, Oscar Green goes up there, right, because he rides his bike too. He's up there, right, after the incident, no more than 2 days, because he can't be quite sure, but it's either the 26th or the 28th, right? But it doesn't matter, because we got video footage of Kaz and all her friends there on the 26th and 27th. Those things are already broken. But he's confirming to me a number of other details that I also like to point out. Now, this is what he said to me. A keen mountain bike rider and resident of the area spoke to you. Okay, I understand you go biking down the Smilog Trail. Could you tell me what you saw? He said, I went up to Smilog in February last year sometime, and then a week later, the top of the trees were gone, and the pallet bench we used to sit on. Do you know the date, maybe? 26th or 28th? So you're able to say that around the 26th of February or 28th, the trees at the bottom of the bike trail were snapped at the top. Yes, these are the broken trees. And I showed him a picture of the area. He said, just to clarify, is this the area that you're talking about? He said, yeah, right by the pallet thing. And he said, any idea what might have caused that? Now, he thought the council had done it. Now, in our early presentation, there was a person with a drone with a GoPro camera on it, just videotaping himself. But this is like April time now, 2 months after, and the pallet, you can see it's all smashed. The trees are still broken, although there's been some clearing done. But the point is, you fit the timeline all together with that new witness we got now. Everything fits. It fits with why the explosion happened. It fits why the Apache had to go and crash. What the people working in the hospital and why the roads were all blocked off. Everything fits. It's a timeline of events that you cannot make up. Everything we find fits.
Yeah.
You know, so, I mean, and of course, with the EMF stuff that I'd done, amazingly, Kaz and Steve, one of the other witnesses that were with it, he saw a lot of stuff. They followed that debris trail up to the top, and I remember going up there with an EMF detector, having a quick look around, but then I thought, there's definitely something here, let's map it out. Very quickly, you can see where the object that was shot down, the green object, the trail, interestingly, right, leads into the impact site. If you follow the trail back, right, where do you think it goes? Right to the Lantris and Common area where this thing took place, where people said that the helicopters were landing afterwards, and where all the metal on the Common had been cleaned up as well. And we found something that puzzled me again. What's this third trail here? We going down the edge of the road here. But as Kaz said, they were dragging it up because there's a big open space around this corner, right? The corner that they crossed over to get into the trees and saw what was there. That's where a lot of the EMF signals were. They were at the strongest there, actually. I thought, well, why is it here? I said the only rational explanation is that they've obviously got into this big open area to put it on a truck or put a lot of it on that Chinook helicopter. That's the only thing that made sense. And just to, strange snow there as well. You know, the videotape of that, odd snow. There was no weather record for snow that day, but yet there it is. It's snowing right in that area. Very strange weather anomalies, again, linked with UFO cases from the past. And I was going to say something else. Oh, yes. There's a little detail that I like in the gentleman's 6-minute excerpt. He gave us a drawing. And I know you put the link up on the chat there. If you go in there, something I noticed, because Kaz and all her friends had done, and neighbors who were interested, came to the area. There was like all these bramble bushes in the center of where this thing would have been. And he drew that. He drew that in his thing. And then I looked at the picture afterwards. I thought, well, hang on. There's the bramble bushes there that he mentioned. It's minus the green calf, of course. But it's all the broken trees there, freshly broken, snapped right at the top. You know, midway points. Yeah. And a smashed pallet ramp. And a picture of a military tire truck there. You know, and I mean, how much more evidence do you need? I mean, I can't do any more than that unless, of course, some military person comes out and says, yeah, here's photographs of it.
Yeah.
We've done everything humanly possible on our end, you know, so
we can certainly prove that it wasn't an exercise. I mean, it was only in March, I believe, of this year that we actually got a Freedom of Information request back from Air Command Secretariat. And Gary wrote, I wish to make a Freedom of Information request. Please could you confirm if any information is held within the Ministry of Defence, the Defence Infrastructure Organisation, or any office that would hold information pertaining to any day or night military exercises or day or night low-flying exercises for the same area of South Wales for the time of February of 2016. And they wrote back, I am treating your correspondence as a request for information under the Freedom of Information Act 2000. A search for the information has now been completed within the Ministry of Defence, and I can confirm that no information in the scope of your request is held. There were no programmed Defence air exercises in South Wales in February of 2016. Thank you very much.
Confirmation,
So
right?
why were they here, and how did I know on the morning of the 26th of February 2016, when I stated in my comment on Wales Online, I can categorically state that was no exercise.
No, it's too much evidence and too much denial to prove it.
I'm sorry, right? I got to say this because I've worked on that particular aspect of this case for a long time. Me and Kaz have just been hammering them with their constant denials. There was no exercise. It never was an exercise. Project Chameleon, or Exercise Chameleon as they call it, happened up in North England, southern Scotland area, during the 10 days prior, early February to February 16th. It was already announced on the military watchboards that people who were interested in these things. And I would like to point out more, if this is anything to go by, I mean, I can see exercises on Twitter, right? Because people like to talk about this stuff, about exercise, because Exercise Chameleon is a biannual event. It's held twice. Excuse me, I got hiccups. It's held twice a year. I can find exercises from August of that year or in 2015, 2017. But when it comes to this supposed exercise that's happening down here, there's one person on there even writing to St. Athens, asking them. No one seems to know anything. And would you believe it, right? Wales Online, or Fails Online, who wrote the story in the first place, claiming it to be sources have confirmed it was an exercise. Well, I'd like to know what sources they were, because none of the ones we've contacted know anything. What I really am surprised by is when Wales Online posted that story, even up until about 11:30 in the morning, the incident's already happened now, a couple of hours earlier, and yet they still haven't got any story. They were working on a story through the night, and then they finally released it and said it was Exercise Chameleon, and yet they don't list their sources, they don't name the branch, they don't do anything.
Well, according to the Training Over Private Land Act, Section 15, there must be a press briefing months in advance, along with ministerial briefings and everything else. So clearly the press weren't told if they were still working on a story at 3:39 in the morning about it.
Oh, no, because they'd have had it written out, ready to be, well, probably already printed, just waiting to be dispatched.
Exactly.
So it's just a massive cover-up, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
But,
being uncovered.
I've got... Go on.
Sorry, go on. No, it's right, Gary. Go on.
No, I was just going to say, obviously, the next step now for us is to try and figure out what actually that thing was and how they knew and what, I mean, we've done just about everything else. I mean, we've uncovered the cover-up. Now we got to find out why they've covered it up and what it is that was here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The next step for us will be to launch the petition.
Yeah.
Petitioning the government for a change in the law, for them to instigate a process of disclosure in this country, to follow suit with America, and at least tell us that these things are real. At the moment, Gary and I are trying to get as much public awareness to this petition before it's launched, because in the UK, petitions have a very strict time limit of 3 months, which is why most petitions don't ever get off the ground. So right now, I don't want 10,000 signatures, because 10,000 signatures only gets me a question raised in Parliament. And after the way that Cameron and his cabinet took the mick out of the MP that asked about Rendlesham, and they all laughed at him, I want 100,000 signatures so that I can place that petition in the hands of the Prime Minister himself and demand a change in the law. The Ministry of Defence keep talking about a public interest test. Well, let's put it to the test. Let's see who's interested. I want 100,000 signatures, and we'll get it to government.
Yeah.
To get
Well,
this
if I can do, I'm going to say, if I can do anything to help, if you've got a digital copy of the petition, I'll put it on my website.
fantastic. As soon as it goes out, and it's not gone out yet because Gary and
Yeah.
I are still trying to gather as much public awareness as possible. But when it
Yeah.
goes out, we're going to share it on every platform possible, and we're
Yeah.
going to ask everybody to do the same.
It's going to be
Yeah,
something.
but if you
that
send me a
really
link, I'll put it on Facebook group,
Fantastic.
website, wherever it needs to go. It's not
Because
a
whether
problem.
Well,
you
funny
believe
enough-
or don't believe, it's time that we were told the truth. We're
Oh
not
yeah,
children,
definitely.
you know.
Yeah. Right. We have got a few questions for you. Funny, the first question was, "What's your next step?" And you both answered it. So
Sorry.
synchronicity.
Okay, sorry, mate.
It's okay. Right. I'm not gonna do them in order. I'm gonna do more in relevance. So
Mhm.
this one is from Nickname. Most you know as Nicola. And she wants to know, I was going to ask this anyway, has anyone been reported missing around the event?
Not that I'm
Or
aware of.
before or after?
Not that I'm aware of, but there were other strange things going on that night.
Yeah.
We don't know if it's a slip in time. I mean, certainly we lost over an hour in time. There was
Yeah.
another lady in the village that said that something horrific happened to her that night.
Right.
And she'd lived in that family home since she was a child. And she sold her house and left the village. That's how serious
That's
this
how
was.
bad it was.
So I can't disclose it.
No. I totally understand that. But
there were other
Yeah.
things going on, yeah.
yeah, I was going to say, were there any other, it's not so much paranormal, like supernatural occurrences happened at the same time, whether it involved cryptids or anything?
Well, one of the witnesses that we have who's given us a statement, and she can't come
Yeah.
forward because of her profession, has 3 disabled children.
Right.
And she's always awake throughout the night because one of her children will always be awake because of their needs. And that was the only night since 2007 that she'd not had a child awake. There was something else going on. Other people had left their homes, they thought, at around 9:30 in the evening, only to get to where they were going at 2 a.m. on a journey that should have taken them 20 minutes. So there was something else going on across the board. We don't know if it's a slip in time or what.
That's what it sounds like. If it's happened to a lot of people.
At least 4 people that I know of.
And all in the same area as well.
Some in Llantrisant area.
Yeah.
And some here.
So what's the distance between the two places?
5 miles.
Oh, so not too far.
Anyway. In a straight line, anyway.
Yeah. So about a 20-minute drive or something.
Yes.
Ish. Yeah. So, so that's the 4 that you know of, including yourselves.
Yeah.
So even
and
that
I've
doesn't
been
make
so
sense.
cold. Dead cold. It was like touching a piece of meat in the chill cabinet.
Really?
Even when I came in, I didn't take my coat off. I was so cold. I'd never been that cold.
Yeah,
I
I've gone all.
I didn't even know that I'd lost time. It was only
Yeah.
because of the investigation that Gary carried out that I knew the time of the explosion because I didn't know. And then David and I, well, it was David that pointed it out to me and said, well, look, we were only at the gate maybe 10 or 15 minutes to watch all of this unfold. And then when we came back, we heard the explosion. So, if this happened at around 2:30 in the morning, giving us 15 minutes at the gate, that's 2:45. Back at my house to have a cuppa, that's 3 o'clock. The explosion was at 4:21. Where did that hour and a half go? And that made my stomach flip because I didn't know, because it's happened to me. I didn't know I lost time, but I know now. And that really does freak me out.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. You just talking about it is actually making me feel sick.
Sorry.
No, it's not. It's not your fault.
A lot of people have said to me, Kaz, will you be regressed? You know, I tried that once with someone who said that they were a hypnotist and turned out to be, I've never been hypnotized before. So I tried to follow his directions completely and turned out that he was some blue coat from Pontins and wasn't qualified
right.
at all. But I'm afraid to be regressed because I don't even, if I record something, am I recalling it from memory or am I reaching for the artistic side of my brain because they put me in some kind of dream state? I have to stick with what I saw, what I know, and not be regressed and reach for something that possibly isn't true, because then I'd be changing my story. Kaz has changed her story. She said this. People have had a go because I've used the same terminology when I describe what happened. Well, I can only describe it one way.
Oh yeah.
And that's just how it is. I'm not going to change for them, because I can only tell people what I saw and what happened to me.
Just trolls doing that. I mean, I'm getting told now I ask too many questions. So that's just about the best they can do now. He's like, oh, this is not true, or that's not true. This is not quite accurate. Gary just asked too many questions. A few people are saying, well, what am I supposed to do then? Stay silent for God's sake.
How are you going to find out if you don't ask?
We've asked all the questions. We've even been to the Home Office. We tried to go to the Zenith, and the Zenith wanted the original photographs. We have copies of photographs of some of the objects. And the alleged UFO group that hold them have refused to release them. So we couldn't go to the Zenith, unfortunately. What sort of UFO group does that?
Unless they're all being controlled, which is...
Well, yes, there is that,
That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
When they got friends in St. Athan.
Is there any more questions? I know you want to...
Yeah, we've got a few more, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So the next one is from Umbra. He's put, is it possible they also use private organisations to circumvent the FOI Act?
And that's what they've been doing, using private planes so that they can never be subjected to a freedom of information.
You can't subject them to it. Yeah, they're beyond that. Because they're private. They're not linked into the FOI system or required by the law of the FOI Act. So they can use private organizations.
They don't have to answer to it, do they?
Well, I mean, one of the silly things we asked them, why did you recover all the metal from the Lantriston Common area? I mean, it's been there for years. It's been left to rust and rot in the grassland and everything. The council or whoever owns that land is responsible. But it seems if you want your land cleaned up, just get a military exercise to go there, because they'll do it for you. But when we asked them about it, they said Section 26 for a cleanup of metal.
Section 26, Defence, National Security. So, as I said to you, Andy, next time you throw out a washing machine or a rusty old bike, make sure that you phone your local Ministry of Defence and let them know that there's a national security risk outside your house. All right, so they can come and get it.
It's a joke, isn't it?
I don't know if they're using, if they're using private organizations, we can't ask these questions. They can just turn around and say, not in the scope of your request or not our business. So
nothing to do with us. Contact them. Right, got a few more questions. Is that okay? Sure. Yeah. Right. So I'm going to leave that one to the end. So this one's from Alchemical Weddings, and they would like to know: do you guys think the craft was alien or an exotic military vehicle?
Alien.
Yeah.
We are yet to build a pyramid that can fly, and if we could, it doesn't jettison smaller craft. I mean, this thing was so big that from 200 yards away, whilst I was looking at the bottom, you couldn't see the top in your peripheral vision. this thing was at least 1,000 feet high. We cannot build
Wow.
anything like that. You know, the only things that I have seen that are similar are what was seen over the Kremlin, and what was seen over Berlin, and what was seen over the Pentagon in 2018 without the lights on. You know,
Well, I mean,
there must be another line of communication going on for them to even know what these buildings are.
I was just going to say, I mean, a lot of people are, you know, if the exotic military thing, I mean, the TR-3B is what comes up a lot. But I
Yeah.
mean, that's been mentioned since the 1980s, so we're going back 30, 40 years, yeah? My guess is, I mean, and when I see these designs, these, what we'll call them exotic military craft then, but they always seem to have an element of aerodynamics about them. You know, they're always like sleek, and they've got those nice sort of like just those aerodynamic designs. You know,
It's
they're
not like a
designed
brick,
like-
is it, Gar?
No, it's not like a brick. No, it doesn't fly like a brick. You know,
Yeah.
or you know, display itself like a flying brick. But but no, I mean, a pyramid is not exactly an aerodynamic kind of
Yeah.
design. But if you look at all these really, even, you know, I mean, Michael Schratt is someone who I've liked to watch over time because he's done all these concept artworks that have been put out for these new, more exotic weapon military planes that we design. But they're always that aerodynamic type of thing, you know, sleek and
Yeah.
slender and very,
Yeah.
you know, with all the wings and
Like bird-like.
yeah, you know, they're just more sleek and slim, you know. I mean, they're not
Yeah.
slim, but they're not a pyramid, you know. They're not a brick, you know what I mean? They're not some big thing like that. They're just,
No.
just not, you know what I mean?
It's not a flying breeze block or anything like that, is it? Not yet.
No.
Still time for that.
No. When you think of something that's going to fly, you don't necessarily think, oh, yeah, it's pyramid, you know, because it's not aerodynamic, is it? And it was
Definitely
enormous. It was enormous. And did jettison at least 15, possibly 20 smaller craft. So, and those craft are about the size of a small car. So that's quite big, really.
It's a carrier, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. Another question from Alchemical Weddings. Is that the Michael Mary ley or a different one? I'm guessing she means the ley lines.
Ley lines.
Ley lines, yeah. I would just like to... Sorry, go on, Kaz.
No, go on, because I'm not sure what it's called. But yes, there is a ley line near here.
Yeah, there's I think there's like two of them, isn't it? But something that I discovered in my research in the middle of all this is something very odd with the ley lines. I mean, if you look at what they called arbor points, they're like trig points, you know, on mountains and where, you know, supposedly the Earth's energy lines.
Right, okay.
Yeah, you know, there's one up on Caerphilly Mountain I know of. You know, it's like it looks like a little, like a concrete pillar thing, you know, and it's got like a circle with these like three points on it, you know. So it's a circle with a triangular line. Anyway, they're placed on various parts around the UK, and if you look at the maps and look at the ley lines, that's a map that I found, and I looked at. Well, let's have a look at all these major UFO sightings that have happened in recent years. You know, Rendlesham, Nottingham, Wilsthorpe, Sheffield, Denby Light's another one I've done. The Pentyrch incident, and what do you call it? Berwyn Mountain, and a few others. They're all near or on these ley lines. These really big UFO cases, and they're right on these ley lines or in the center of where these things connect. And that's not a coincidence. We have been saying for a while, if they're interdimensional, they have a power source. If the power source comes from the Earth's energy grid, they've obviously learned to tap into it somehow. Now, don't ask me how it works. It's just an idea, but it's an idea that has some evidence to sort of compare it with. So, yeah, ley lines is definitely what we're talking about here.
Yep. No, thank you. Next one is from Stockholm Pearls and Views. And they'd like to know, do Kaz and Gary think CERN is attracting more craft?
Well,
I think they're trying to work out how to open portals.
Yeah.
Me and my friend were discussing this, and he's pretty intrigued by something they were doing recently. I think they opened up another one of these large CERN type facilities, and there was did they do some sort of? It was like what Kaz was talking about earlier with the the Olympics we had over here, there was a ceremony, and that ceremony seemed to have some very demonic kind of, very sinister kind of feel to it. They did something for the CERN project as well. They had like
Yes.
what, I can't remember what the hell they called. I don't know, some sort of show they put on, and they were all dressed up in these weird costumes, some big bull or big Baphomet looking thing. And you know, when you're doing that, to me, given what I've learned about all this, it's something very demonic about it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're trying to. I think they're working on how to open and close portals. Maybe the Space Force thing is definitely interrupting the natural way these things come here. So maybe they're trying to figure out. I don't know. This is just, we're all speculating
I
here.
don't think they know what they're playing with. You know, I don't
think they should be messing around with it from what I've been learning. I mean, there are people who've been looking into this for years and years, and I speak to them from time to time when UFO conferences are online, and I see what they post, and it's like, you boys are really messing with something here you shouldn't be playing with. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. That's
Look,
it.
I don't want to preach to anyone, but we do have a great book before us, and it does appear to be a history book. I mean, it's already told us that there will be a war in the heavens that every free man will witness. And with the space-based weapons, and now we've got the armed military in space. I mean, why have we got the military in space if there's not going to be a war in the heavens? And opening the bottomless pit, and Satan and his demons come through it. What if CERN does open a portal? We can't stop whatever's coming through, you know. So
that's it. If what if they do open one and they can't close it?
Exactly.
Like I said,
that's
something you don't know what you're
thing.
messing with.
Yeah,
you're playing with something you don't know what you're messing with. So yeah,
it's dangerous, isn't it?
Concerning.
Very, very, very. Right, we have 2 more questions, and then we are going to have to end it.
Mm-hmm.
So the next one, from Alchemical Weddings again, is about the disclosure. What do you think of the current disclosure coming out of the USA? I've heard some people say that it's deflecting from the real UFO stuff.
Okay, we were going to discuss David Grush, and I want to start by saying that Donald Trump, whilst he was still serving as president, ordered the Pentagon to tell Congress everything they knew about UFOs. Everything. And when Biden got in, Biden diluted it all. So we got 5%, is what we were told. 5% of vehicles they can't explain. So I think that Grush, because he's come forward with permission from the Department of Defense, so he's not just a whistleblower, he's been pushed forward, if you like, to tell Congress what's happened. And he is telling them everything. But he is being used by the Pentagon legally to tell Congress everything they know about UFOs. And that obviously there will be a skiff because Congress need to assess and investigate before they will disclose to us, the general public, what we can know. Because I do believe there's possibly 5% that's going to scare the hell out of everybody.
Yeah.
Are you finished, Kaz?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very skeptical about David Grush, but now that I've had a chance to sort of learn about him and see what he's done, I'm more open and on board with him now. I would say also, considering the document that Kaz mentioned with Trump and the UAPs, and they can't only identify only a certain small amount.
Yeah.
Adam Schiff, is it? Did a Congress hearing or some sort of hearing afterwards where they were looking at videos and discussing things. And to be honest with you, I mean, I've seen better footage shot from a 1970s video camera where somebody didn't know how to operate it. I mean, I got better stuff here. That's only like a few seconds, but what they were showing was crap.
Yeah.
So that's him watering it down because he's on Biden's team. But then, of course, I think with the Republicans controlling the House, they're getting a bit more solid with it. Now,
I listened very closely to what they said, and they're literally avoiding the truth. Some of the people being questioned there, and to turn around and say that it's the UAP task force and say, well, it's not in our database, when it damn well should be. And I cannot believe that they're not already liaising with their allies, with NATO and with the UK military. And I cannot believe that they do not know about this case. So they're not necessarily lying, but they are definitely avoiding what the questions that
Yeah.
Congress put to them. Definitely.
But I think when you say real UFO stuff, it's deflecting from the real. Well, it depends what you mean by that, really. I mean, are they trying to stop disclosure happening? Or are they trying to reword what disclosure will mean? Because I've got this idea, right? The disclosure we want, of course, is what's happening, what does it mean, and how can you divulge it in a calm way? Because it's not going to be easy. Trust me, it's not.
No.
But
Well,
I've got
David Grush actually steered away from extraterrestrial. He said non-human because he's
Non-human.
talking about the ones that are here, not the ones that are coming.
I'm just worried that some of these people are going to push it more to that. Oh, they are a threat. We need to build weapons, so therefore you can funnel more money into the deep black projects that they're working on. So yeah, they're obviously going to be challenges back and forth. So yeah, they will deflect some of them, but some of them are trying to be more open and honest. So yeah,
I think if we weren't facing a threat, they wouldn't have gone to so much trouble and so much expense to build Space Force. And we're not just talking America. The whole world is involved with Space Force.
Yeah.
And that, we need to beg the question,
why
do we need an armed military in space? That's not to deflect rocks from our satellites. There is something else coming, and we're not being told about it. I think the NASA administrator was dragged off stage, wasn't he, for saying that they expect the arrival around 2025, or we'd be invaded by 2025. Yeah. And that's a NASA administrator, so.
Well, there you go. Right, got one more question for you, but I do have to nip out for like 1 minute. I've just got to go and do something. So I'm going to put the question up, and while you answer, I'll be as quick as I can.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So this is from David Griffin, and he wants to know, do you think the response or interest of any various official body, MOD, MI5, tells us anything about the authenticity of the sighting / contact event or an individual or group experiences?
No, I think it will be a blanket response if they are to disclose anything. It would be a blanket response that these things are real, as opposed to going into individual events. I'd like them to come clean about what happened in Pentyrch, because they clearly filmed it and orchestrated it and controlled the whole event. But I can't see them ever releasing real footage of real incidents or individual experiences. No, it would just be a blanket. We think, well, they know, because they have the Condign report that they completed in the year 2000, which was a Ministry of Defence secret study into UFOs, where they state on numerous occasions that UFOs are of no defence significance and are not a threat. And if that's the case, the Ministry of Defence cannot hide behind Section 26 defence in this case. So I'm yet to question them about their Section 26s. So that's another answer to where this case might be going. To challenge them on Section 26 defence through their own Condign report, which is a secret study into UFOs. So they know about them, but they need to tell us. And I think, I don't think it's going to be an individual thing. It's definitely going to be blanket, the same as in the United States. We're going to get blurry videos at best.
Yep.
Gary, do you want to add anything?
I was just reading the question again. He's saying about the authenticity of this sighting, is he? Or
I'll just put it back up 1 sec. Sorry.
Says, do you think the response or interest of any various official body, MOD, MI5, tells us anything about the authenticity of the sighting, contact, event, and individual group or experiences? Well, I think what we've received clearly shows they're covering something up on this. The fact that they will not engage with us in any way except tonight until we force them to answer. They're not going, and on the larger scale of things, they're not going to just come out and tell us everything. I mean, they're obviously going to just chip away at it and drip feed it and not tell us truthful things until you force them to. And unless somebody in official bodies who can pull the levers of power and maybe do a big expose right there and then, it's always going to be drip feed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, it's hard to get answers from these people, but the way they respond is always the same. It's always it's like individual little things. You ask them a lot of questions, they just say vexatious request or something, or
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard to, but I mean, the way they've responded to our case clearly shows it was real, because their cover up. They can't. It's like I heard the saying once: you cannot prove a lie, you can only prove a truth. You know, they can keep telling more things, but we'll always find out in the end.
Problem is with them, they've told so many lies, they have to tell more lies to cover up the previous lie.
All they can do.
And the proverbial thorn in their side is me, because I know the truth.
Yeah,
And
I
so
suppose
they
as
can't
well.
lie because I was there.
Yeah, the more lies that they tell, the more cover-ups they've got to do.
Yeah,
exactly. So, I mean, this petition hopefully is going to at least, because I saw it on Sky News, it was very interesting. They said that they have to start taking these things more seriously. I said, I'm not being funny, Sky News, but you haven't taken this thing seriously at all. It's only now because you're being forced. Because the public's perception of this thing, that's really where it's going to come from. They have to get the public more involved. And
that's what the petition's about.
Yeah, because
public interest test. Let's put it to the test.
Yeah, the public's interest has to become more solidified and more unified. You got to start asking questions, otherwise they'll just keep palming you off with exercise this.
The public want to know, sign the petition, and we'll get them to tell us. We'll ask for a change in the law.
Yeah. But Gary, you've got to remember, you asked too many questions, so you need to be careful.
Sorry, that's just a thing now. I got to say this, right? Because
detrimental to your not so learned friends' case, Gary.
I know they just want to keep their heads up their backsides and pretend everything's wonderful in that smelly little world of theirs. But what makes me laugh is the trolls. I mean, oh God, I got to say something about this quickly. In the beginning, it was all laughs and jokes and insults. And then when the information got stronger and a little bit more concise, suddenly it's like, oh, well, we better find ways to offer ridiculous answers to these questions, something that people could buy the layman could buy. But then once we started destroying those, it became a little bit more hostile, well, this was just exercise chameleon, or it was flares. And then as soon as we destroyed the flares and exercises or the parachutes, then it's like, well, they probably just kept it secret. So they're not allowed to do it secret because Kaz destroyed that with the rules and regulations. And now we're at the point where no organization has no actual paperwork, no documentation. More witnesses are coming forward. Our case is growing so strong now. It's like a big, hard brick wall they can't climb over or knock through. So all they can do is talk to the wall and call it silly names. And, Kaz, I love this. All the ones on comments I'm reading are the things we get. Kaz speaks too eloquently, therefore she's reading from a script. She's debunked, look, because it sounds like she's reading from a script. Oh, wow, what an excellent comeback there. And Gari asks too many questions, so therefore he's debunked too. And I'm like, is this what we've reduced you to now? Is it you trolls and debunkers? Is that the best you can do? Because some of the people who make comments and Twitter comments and wrote articles in their magazines, I kept those links. I go back to them now, and they're broken or gone. Yeah. Why they deleted them, I don't know. But I got a funny feeling they realized, oh shit, we've made a mistake. Yeah, we've been played. Somebody, I love it, but I wish these people would just grow up and let it go, because I just think they're either being paid or they're just too thick at this point. So
bit of both.
Probably.
Yeah. But the thing is, I think as soon as somebody admits to their involvement, then everyone else is going to have to follow suit.
Yeah.
So that's why if they all just say, we don't know what you're talking about, there's no one owning up to being responsible as to what happened and their involvement of it.
If there was no exercises...
If there was no left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing, and that's.
Here's a question then for people to ponder, right? If there was no exercises, no counterterrorism drills, or nothing of any kind happening here, then why did we have all these military helicopters and jets and planes and military on the ground and all these spyware and all this NATO stuff going on and all these secret, top level people? What were they doing here then? What was their involvement? Why did they even bother coming here? They got plenty of land they can train on.
And how did
Yeah.
I know?
You know, the only reason they would do it, and this is the only thing, is that they were here for a real mission or a real combat situation. They knew what was coming. They knew what it was. But they're obviously trying, because they've obviously done a successful job, because there are people around in Pentyrch, who don't even know this happening, and they live right next door to the field.
I remember
Do you know
Kaz
what I mean?
saying last time.
Yeah. It's crazy.
So,
But
it's,
thankfully, that's
yeah.
changing.
yeah, hopefully, thanks to you two. Anyway,
I'd like the
definitely.
media to start writing on it a bit more. They may
You
write
like what,
silly.
sorry?
I would like the media. I know they write silly articles or make it jokey, but at least it would get some attention. I mean,
Yeah.
I would just like to, I mean, print some stories on it. Why are you guys so silent about this?
I think there's a denosis. You know, the fact that I haven't had the press at my door would imply that there's a denotice. I do believe that certain individuals were warned off from investigating this case.
Yeah.
In the very beginning, which was a shame, because had they got involved, they'd witness the snow for themselves, just falling in the one field, which was bizarre, to say the least.
Yeah.
I think there's an awful lot of evidence in this case. I think we've proved it without the need for photographs, but we do have some. We're still trying to recover videos at present, but
Yeah.
as of yet, we don't have them.
No, unfortunately not. But like I said before we came on air, what I said I was going to do, just remind me to do it, because I will forget. So, but hopefully you'll both come back on next year at some point with some more, I suppose, good news for us, like the general public.
The case is growing exponentially. I do have a lot more witness testimonies.
Yeah,
they have made statements, which is a good thing, even though they wish to remain anonymous. Some people might say that's a bit sketch, but I don't think it's a bit sketch if these people are social workers and teachers and
it's
professionals along those lines. That would, are they going to come forward just for that benefit of that statement, where they got no monetary gain from it at all, and putting their professions on the line because of it? No, I wholeheartedly agree that and respect that they wish to remain anonymous, but they have given us statements, and I do have quite a lot now of statements.
Ooh, sounds very, very interesting. Right, well, we are going to end it there, unfortunately. But
Andy, I could talk to you forever.
I know, it'd be great. But it's just with YouTube and the podcast and that, I've got to keep it to a minimal even. But you are both more than welcome to come on at any point and give us more updates to talk about anything completely different. It's entirely up to you guys.
Wow.
Like I said, I could sit here all night, all weekend, if you had the choice.
I'll just say one thing. I mean, if anyone knows of any legal measure we can make this more official, let us know. Because obviously now we're going to have
knows a barrister, well, we could take the MOD to court. Fantastic. Let's do it.
I mean, something.
Why not?
I mean, we're not, we're doing this ourselves. We've obviously got input from people, but me and Kaz are doing this all ourselves. It's a lot of hard work, but it's a worthy cause, no doubt, of course.
Definitely. Well, fingers crossed for you both. Hope eventually you get the closure or the information that you need to then move on to whatever's going to be next from this. And just hope everything works well and you get what it is you're looking for.
I know there are people out there that have video and they've not released it because
they're from
maybe, I don't know, because
shall we stay with that? I mean,
it's for monetary gain when that's couldn't be further from the truth.
I mean, there was a group of people in Colwinston who saw something, and they've got video and pictures. We've seen screenshots of them.
Yeah.
But I think because of our previous experience from a so-called UFO group who kind of ruined that for us, I think they've decided not to bother with it now, and that's something we've lost. Maybe.
Yeah.
I hope they're watching this and they say, "Look, we don't divulge information. We don't let go. We keep things confidential until, of course, you tell us to.
Yeah.
We can't use it. Do you know what I mean?
I
I
think
know
7 years is testament to that, Gary, that we will keep people's confidence.
Yeah, we haven't said a word about anyone until they decide that they want to.
And I never would.
Yeah. Right. Well, I'm going to thank you both so much for coming on. Absolutely appreciate it. It's just been amazing, the information and everything you've got going on. I can't get my head around how 7 years and you're still doing it. It's
Still
just
more to find.
mind blowing. I know, probably another 70 years.
Yeah, that would be good. Not that long.
Yeah, I just say thank you as well, Andy, and to Joe and everyone else, and whoever's tuned in and asked questions or just watched us. Thank you very much. But do us a favor, the more traffic we get on this now, the better our position will be. And as the subject UFO grows, anyway, it'll be good for us. So this is definitely a case to get behind.
Definitely.
Yeah. Right. Well, I'm going to thank you both now. I'm just going to let the viewers know who's coming on next week. So next Wednesday, I've got Nathaniel Gillis. That's going to be non-paranormal. That's just going to be a chat. That's on Wednesday. And then on Friday the 11th, I've got Agnost on. And co-presenting that is going to be Preston Dennett. So for those who want to see who's coming on after that, either go to the website or just have a look on YouTube. So thank you again so much for coming on. It's been mind-blowing and amazing, and love you guys to bits. Absolutely do. So I'm going to end it now. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you, everyone who listens and subscribes on the podcast. Thank you to the new paid members on YouTube, and thank you, everyone who's subscribing and keeping the channel going. I said have a great weekend and hope to catch you guys next week. So take care and goodbye.